So I'm here with Kate to record another Theramonial. Kate, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yes, happy to be here. Hello.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move into the first question. So tell me, what made you curious about therapy in the first place?
I think actually my first introduction with therapy wasn't necessarily positive on my end. I had a misunderstanding that therapy, I don't know why I thought that it was so to put it completely straight, I felt like people who needed therapy were kind of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I started to have some some anxiety, and I had my first panic attack after my second baby was born, and it shocked me. I didn't know what was going on, but my family members said you need to go to therapy. So I went to therapy, and it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but that first go around, I don't think I understood how good it could be at that point in my life, but have since like grown to love it.
I see. So first curiosity, maybe it wasn't really your own. It was kind of more like these people in your life who care about you saying this is this is something that maybe but therapy could help with, but in your
Mhm.
own mind, maybe things weren't like extreme enough or you didn't want to view yourself as somebody who needed therapy or something like that.
Yeah, I think that was it. Like if I needed to find a babysitter so that I could go to therapy, I usually would get embarrassed to say where I was going. At that point, now it's no big deal. I I'll tell anybody about it, but I think part of it too with that was that the therapist that I went to wasn't the right fit for me. He was a really great therapist, and he was very skilled, very knowledgeable, but over the years when I found one that was the right fit for me, it changed everything because I could see real benefit, and I could take home the tools that she taught me in my therapy sessions, and I could put them to work immediately. Whereas before I felt like his method was more just sitting down and I would talk and he didn't really say anything back. So I knew how to talk. I could talk to anybody about what was going on, but he wasn't really giving me tools to use. So once I found a therapist that was giving me tools that related to my situation, and I saw real live benefit, it was incredible. It changed everything.
I see. Okay, so a little bit at the beginning of I don't want to be whatever, the kind of person who needs therapy, that doesn't seem acceptable or okay. And then also when I do end up going with kind of with some embarrassment and uncertainty around it, it doesn't feel like it's actually really helping. Like it's a nice guy, he kind of knows what he's doing, he's got the credentials, but this just isn't the right fit. It's not actually doing much for me.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay, so I wonder if you so it sounds like you worked with one therapist and then ended up with another. So how did you how did you first reach out to your this first therapist, and then kind of how did you end up reaching out to the other one?
Okay, that's a good question. And there's actually a lot more in between A and B right there. So the first therapist that I found him because a close family member said, I've gone to this person and I know him. He's a friend of our family's, and I trust him as a person. And it just so happened that I had actually been to a class that he taught. He had taught parenting classes, I think. And my husband had gone and thought, hey, he's cool. He's really great. He's knowledgeable and he's just a good person. And so I'll go to him. And I also, part of why I needed therapy, if you so to speak, is I'm not a very assertive personality, or I haven't been in the past. It has been hard for me to speak up for what I need or what works for me. And so because I felt like he was a professional and that I was told that I needed this, I didn't speak up and say this isn't giving me benefit. But later on, so you fast forward like 5 or 6 years, and I hadn't really gone to a lot of therapy in between then. I was able to kind of manage the anxiety stuff with exercise and diet and that sort of thing. But when I had another baby, I had some pretty severe anxiety and depressive symptoms, and panic attacks were getting really severe. And so at that point, we started looking for other therapists. And I actually went to two or three, and I kind of felt like it was the same ball game. I was going there and they were cool, but they would give me materials that I already had researched on my own, and I wasn't improving. So what actually happened was I got in such a bad place that I could no longer eat or sleep, and I was panicking around the clock. So at that point, I ended up in the emergency room, and the social worker there, who I look to as my fairy godmother, because at that point, I could hardly sit up, and no one had really been assertive with me. And because I'm not assertive, it was a really bad combination, because I would go to a doctor and they would say, well, what do you want to do? And I'd say, well, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. And I wasn't really getting any answers. So when this social worker came in, she was so sweet. She came in with this silver hair and these cute little glasses on the end of her nose. And she asked me what was going on, and I explained to her that I couldn't sleep anymore. I couldn't eat anymore, that I had intrusive thoughts about suicide or hurting my baby that were tormenting me around the clock. And it was extremely troubling. And that I was so afraid that I was going to lose control because my body and my mind felt out of control. But it was so foreign to me as my personality. Like, I like to bake, I like to garden, I have a degree in English and I'm a writer. So that just was very strange to me that this was going on, but nobody seemed to know how to fix the problem. So at that point, she looked me in the eyes, and she's a therapist herself and a social worker. And she said, I don't know you very well, but from what I can tell, you're not going to do any of those things. And no one had been bold enough to just say that straight up. And she told me specific things I needed to do. And one of those specific things, she said, I need you to find a good therapist. Here are two numbers of two people I know that I recommend personally. And so this go around, I called one of those therapists and I said, I've been to several different therapists and I haven't really seen benefit. This is my situation. What can you do for me that will help me? And that put her in kind of a tricky situation, because you don't really know, but she was very confident. And she said, okay, well, I can explain to you what I do. I use EMDR. She explained that a little bit to me. And she said, but why don't you just come to a session and see how it goes? And I went to a session and she taught me EMDR. And long story short, I learned how to reverse panic attacks. At that point in my life, as soon as I would start to relax and fall asleep, I would be woken up from a panic attack, and then I'd panic all night long and I'd throw up, and my digestive system was shot. So she taught me EMDR and helped me practice what to do when intrusive thoughts came, when panic attacks came. And it got to the point where I could wake up and feel my heart just do that little pop, and then it would start to pound and race, and then the intrusive thoughts would come, and I would wake up, and then I would start doing EMDR, this tool that she taught me, and I would say, I'm having a panic attack. And then I'd breathe deep and use my eyes. That's what I did for my motion or whatever that engaged both sides of my brain. Mm-hmm. And then I'd wake up the next morning. And when that would happen, like, I get emotional about it because it was a miracle that completely changed my life. And I grew in confidence over time to where instead of the panic attacks controlling my life, I was learning how to be in control again. And it was a miracle. And that wasn't the only miracle that's come from therapy for me. There have been many others. But so that was a lot of detail, but that was how I got from my first therapist to the one that I have now. And I love her. And through that experience, I've learned that if you go to a therapist and they're not the right fit for you, don't be afraid to say, this isn't working for me. I need to try someone else. There might be someone else out there that's going to suit my personality, my needs a little bit better. And I think any honest therapist would want their clients to benefit, whether it was from them or from someone else. I think so. Anyway, that's how I feel about finding the right therapist.
That's amazing. I was getting emotional too. I'm a little bit of a sucker. Like people don't cry alone, when they're with me. But God, what an incredible story. And so so really the main message is don't be afraid to shop around or to be assertive, to kind of use your own word and ask for what you need and kind of admit when things aren't working and look for better options. Um, I love how that social worker, I think it was in the hospital, right, who said to you, like, you have to do this. You're not, your worst fears are not going to come true. You just need to take care of these symptoms, right? Go to the right therapist. That's amazing. So
It was really neat.
yeah, it's really cool. That's amazing. So your first experience and the ones in between your first and last, or kind of best therapist, I guess, was, it sounds like they weren't like harmful. It was just treading water. And I don't know if that's the right way to put it, because maybe treading water is its own kind of harm, I guess, but you just weren't getting what you needed. And it sounds like things eventually, I mean, spiraled to a point where you were hospitalized and you needed help. So I don't know. It's hard to kind of qualify it as helpful or harmful, but that process got you where you are. So it is what it is, kind of. Um, I wonder, when you think about like the first time you called to, schedule yourself with a therapist, and then that last first time, with a therapist that has worked so well for you, did you feel a difference there? Like a difference in, I don't know, nervousness or anxiety or uncertainty? How did it feel, to make the call? And did you have to go through like insurance? Did you go through any sort of services, or were you directly in contact with a therapist right away? How did that all pan out?
So the the last first time, let's see, that was about 2.5 years ago. And really with her, I was to the point where I was so sick that I didn't really care about insurance at that point, because I was spiraling out of control so much. I was dropping weight. The normal day-to-day functions of sleeping and eating and being able to have cognitive function, those were just disappearing. So at that point, for me, in a way, it was life or death. So I just took that little phone number that the social worker wrote down for me, and I personally called her and talked to her personally and said, I need you to explain to me how this is going to help. Because the other therapists that I ended up seeing, most of them were referrals from other people. The first one was from a family member, like, you should go to him. And then there was one that my OB sent me to, and he was really nice. Yet again, I was like, you're great. You're a really good person. Um, but it wasn't, I didn't like, he printed off some papers and sent them home with me, but it was stuff I already knew. And then the next one that I was sent to, I think out of desperation, another doctor had referred me to a sex addiction recovery center, which, that's okay. That wasn't my situation, but I feel like that therapist was trained to deal with something very different than what I was going through. And so his approach was upsetting to me. And that wasn't anything personal. It was just not the right setting. And so that was the first time I was brave enough, when I went after that appointment, they asked if I wanted to reschedule, and I said no, this didn't work for me. So I think it was just growing to be more assertive and able to say, this is what I need. So that last first time, it was just, I want to know, I need to know, you need to explain to me, because I don't want to waste my time and I don't want to waste yours. And that's nothing personal. But I feel really blessed and really lucky that she was the perfect fit for me. And I think part of that for me, and again, my husband had come to a lot of these other therapists with me just to kind of sit on the sidelines to see, so he could learn along with me. And he loved all of the other ones. He could relate to them. And he was like, I kind of want to go to therapy to them. And I was like, that's cool, you should. But then with my new therapist, I think her being a woman, and just, she had a gift for explaining things in a way that I understood. Um, she's also a mother, and I'm a mother, and my particular situation had a lot to do with my motherhood because it had been brought on with postpartum depression and all of those emotions. So I think that's why it was a better fit. That I don't think one size fits all. You know, the guy who I met who worked in the sex addiction recovery center was a great therapist, and he's probably helped so many people with their particular needs, but his expertise didn't suit mine. So anyway, that kind of explains a little bit of what got me to the point. And so I've, in this new one, I followed her. She was in a different clinic and now she's in a different place. And I've kind of followed her over time. And at this point, I'm coping really well. I'm very in a very healthy mindset for the most part. And that's been with the therapy and medication and a lot of other things that I've done to recover. But I still keep an appointment on the calendar, even if the appointment starts to get closer and I'm just coping great and I'm just seeing that things are going well, then I'll usually just send her a message and say, hey, I think I'm okay. Why don't we schedule it out for 4 weeks down the road? So I've just kind of stuck with it. And there have been times too when I've been doing really well and then I've started to struggle. And so it's been awesome to know that I have an appointment coming up, or I've been doing really well and people approach me a lot because they know I've dealt with a lot of mental illness stuff and they'll say, hey, I need a therapist. Who can I go see? And I'll be doing really well. And so I've sent a few people actually to my therapist because I'll say, you know what, I'm doing great and I have an appointment next Wednesday, but I don't need it. So let me call her and see if that's okay if you take my appointment. So it's been really neat and a huge blessing to keep it on the calendar. And it's also been really cool to kind of be the person to help somebody who's afraid to say, I need therapy, because they know I'm not afraid to talk about it. So they'll come to me. They're like, I can open up to you because I know you're super open about this stuff. And in turn, they have grown to love this therapist that I've gone to and have seen benefit too. So anyway, there you go.
So cool. It sounds like you've kind of caught the bug, like that just, I don't know if high is the right word, but it's so fun. There's nothing more fun than watching people you love heal, and get well and kind of understand that things don't have to stay at any sort of level of misery. It can get better and there is hope for that. You've answered a couple of these questions just really naturally, which I'm so glad, because that's the whole point, is to keep this very conversational. I wonder if there's anything you want to add about how you knew that this current therapist of yours was a good fit. You talked about that initial phone conversation. You talked about the fact that you're both women, that you both have children, just kind of those basic things that you have in common. But I wonder if there's anything else, either from the beginning or through this process, that just felt like it clarified, that she was a good fit.
Yes, there have been a lot of really amazing things come through therapy. So some of the reasons why I feel like she has been a good fit for me in particular is that part of my way of coping and healing from things is through connection. And with the other therapists I went to, I felt like I was pouring out my heart and they were just sitting on the other side of the desk with a big boatload of knowledge, but there wasn't really a feeling or a sense of compassion or connection with them. Whereas with my current therapist, when I would express things to her, sometimes she would cry with me. And, and things have never been in an unprofessional way, but she connected with me as a human being, not just as a client, not just as I'm the doctor and you're the patient type of a thing. It was like, we're both people, we're both going through life. I have some tools that can help you. So in that way, I felt very connected to her as a person. I see her as a dear friend, but I also see her as someone who helps me because she has training that I don't have. So so kind of a mentor, a teacher, in a lot of ways. So in that way, that's been really good. But also, it's just that it didn't end there. Like, she taught me things that have helped me work through It worked. I worked through the postpartum depression. I worked through the panic attacks. But then as time went on, and I was doing well, and maybe I would go several months without going, certain things would crop up, like in relationships. And so I think, well, I have a therapy appointment coming up. Maybe I'll go talk to her and see what to do. And so in those times, I just felt like I would bring something and I'd lay it on the table and we'd look at it together and we'd say, okay, well, let's try this. And she would pull another tool out of her toolbox and we would apply it to that. And so, without getting too detailed about some of those relationship things that were going on, things that I had carried for years and years and years, and I was never brave enough to talk to anybody about them. So it wasn't like I'm having postpartum depression and I'm having panic attacks. It was like, there's something that I didn't even know, that I could heal from. I would take it, I'd lay it on the table, and then I would go and I would have hard conversations with people that I never thought I could have. And surprisingly enough, I was very blessed that when I would say, hey, something happened that hurt me years ago and I need to talk to you about it, they approached that with like, wow, I had no idea that hurt you. And then I would lay it out and I would work through those emotions and in the process heal. Like those hurts that had been hurting in my heart for like my whole life since childhood, it was like they started to heal to the point where they don't hurt anymore at all. And then something else would crop up and I would work through that and I would see healing take place. And not just healing, it wasn't like, oh, I'm better. It was like those relationships that I had kind of stuffed away, some of the hurts that had happened, through those conversations, they blossomed. And our love, with different people who I love in my life, it's grown and just been so amazing that now I'm like, okay, I'm just never going to stop. Like, I'm just going to keep going to therapy because things come up with my kids where I don't understand the way they think. And so then I'll go to therapy and we'll work with that. Or, things with just any little thing, even things that aren't that big. I just feel like there's tools out there. There's knowledge, there's experience people have, and going to therapy has helped me find those tools and has improved my relationships with my children, with my husband, with my parents, with everybody. And so why not? Like, that's what life is all about. And that's what makes life so joyful, is to have good relationships, even though that's the hardest thing in life, I think. It's the most challenging, but the most rewarding.
Yeah, it's so true. I love all of that.
What is that?
You have a little friend.
I do. I do. Did your truck break? Okay.
Okay, take time with him if you need to. If he needs you.
You just need to put the wheels back on his truck.
Very important.
It is. Yeah, we built a truck today. I'm so proud of myself because I'm not much of a builder. That's just not the way my brain works. So I'm so proud. He got this little truck building kit.
Cute.
Let's see. Yes, it's good. Okay, Holland, I don't know if I can get this. I can just screw it in. Okay, I think it's on. Is it on? Is it on? Yep, it's fixed. Okay, it's fixed.
Cute. Okay. So I wonder if there was any, I don't know, anything specific that you haven't already talked about therapy, either with this current therapist or past therapists, that just didn't really work. Like, have there been any interventions that you like EMDR? Was there anything that she tried or offered that just didn't fit, or was there anything more specific about those past therapists that didn't work for you?
Yes. And I think, again, it's important to note that it didn't work for me, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't work for someone else. But if I am to be completely honest, the things that didn't work for me was just sitting there and letting me talk, because I can do that with anybody. Like, I can talk to people. I mean, some people are better listeners than others, but if I went to a session and I just spent the whole time talking and I wasn't really getting feedback from the the therapist or connection, then I didn't feel like that benefited me. Also, a lot of times, some of the therapists that would send me home like with a whole bunch of papers, like, okay, go home and study these. Like, I'm a super busy young mom. And I work from home. Like, there's just, I have so much going on. I don't have downtime to just sit down and study stuff. And that's why I go to therapy, because I can disconnect from all of life's responsibilities and I can focus in on, all right, I need some new tools. And if they are tools that I can apply when the kids are running around the house and I'm tired and I'm cooking dinner, then that tool is going to work for me. But if it's something that I have to like try to find a way to be alone and study, there's a pretty good chance that won't happen. So I haven't seen a lot of benefit from that, but like EMDR is something you can do anywhere, anytime, any place. Like, you could even argue you could do it driving. I mean, you probably don't want to close your eyes driving, but there's not a lot of downtime for me. So that's why that's been so beneficial for me with that. And why, some of the ones that I went and I think sometimes the task of a therapist is to get a person to open up and start talking about some of the stuff they're not willing to talk about. And that can be very therapeutic. But I'm not one to keep things to myself anyway. It's just that loved ones and certain friends are like, that's way beyond me. And that's where you need to take it to a therapist. Oh, we've got some tears. Do you need some help? Did it come apart? Do you want to bring it to me? No? You want to try to fix it? Okay. He's sad for a minute.
That's okay. And you really like take, you need to put the phone down and go over there, whatever you need to do.
Yeah. If he can figure out what he wants. Do you want to bring it to me to fix it? Okay, why don't you bring it over here and I can try. Maybe we'll just need to put it away for a minute. Okay, here, bring it over to me. Did the wheel come off again? Okay. Okay. I need to go help him for just 1 second.
Yeah, go
so
right
set the phone down,
okay.
And I will be right back.
Okay. Yeah, he's been patient, so take your time.
Okay. Okay. Truck is fixed and he is settled.
So sweet. You can just see, it's just clear how much all this work you've put into yourself is helping you, and the way you interact with your kids. It's clear.
Thank you.
I love how every question I ask, you circle back to, like, which is where I got the title of this whole kind of series, is you end up kind of burying your testimony of therapy. Like, you just
yeah, definitely.
Bones, like, it's worked and helped and served you so well. So you had talked a little bit about transitioning to more like kind of maintenance mode therapy, I guess. How did you know that the really active, kind of intense, focused healing time in therapy was over, or more over, And how did you kind of feel that it was time to start moving from maybe, weekly to every other week to monthly? What was that like?
That's a good question. So, um, I started to see over time improvement. I already touched on how I learned how to reverse panic attacks. And at that time, I was struggling with a lot of intrusive thoughts, and I was using that EMDR, and just they would come at the most unexpected times, and they fed into the panic because they would scare me because a lot of them were very vivid, and they were just so horrific. And so I started to see how I would practice it. I would be playing with my baby with some toys, and then I would start to have an intrusive thought. And again, I'm going to be real because these are really what the thoughts are. And they would be thoughts I would picture myself hurting my baby, and that would fuel my panic, because I would picture that, and then I would start to be afraid, and so my level of anxiety would rise, and then I would get more afraid, and then I would think, what if I really did that? And then it would just rise, and it would rise, and so pretty soon my heart would start to race, and then I'd feel like I was going to throw up, and then I'd start to shake, and then the thoughts would get more intense, more vivid, and so I would just get into this awful pattern. So as I started to practice EMDR, maybe I'd sit down to nurse my baby, and again those intrusive thoughts would start to level, and then maybe this time it was, my uncle took his life when I was a teenager, and I would have vivid images of him taking his life, and then I would get afraid, what if I did that to my family? So maybe I'd be nursing my baby and have those thoughts, and then I'd start to practice EMDR, and I'd breathe through it, and then they would lose momentum. And so the panic attacks became less and less common, and the intrusive thoughts became less and less common, to the point where, and I can recognize this, and I could recognize it at the time too. I just couldn't stop the intrusive thoughts. I could recognize the difference between like our daily thoughts, like, oh, I need to walk the dog, I need to go pick up my child from soccer practice, or I need to clean the house. Those are just thoughts, and they kind of roll and they kind of come and go. But those intrusive thoughts were something different. And so once I could see that the intrusive thoughts were much less common, and it was more just daily thoughts, and I could see that I was improving, I would go less. I'd say, well, let's go 2 weeks this time. And then, as I started coping better with day-to-day tasks, and I was able to drive again, I could see the physical manifestations of healing. And so we would just go less and less. And then, um, I mean, because when I started out, I could hardly even sit up. So at this point, I was like back into life pretty much. And I think it took me about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, maybe even up to 12 of more intensive therapy. And then after that, my therapist actually told me, you are doing great. You probably don't need to come as much. It's up to you. But so that was one thing, was that she could recognize it in me too. And I think you can see it in people. You can tell in their face a lot of times. So that was where we just decided, okay, well, let's just chill out for a little bit. And I said, well, I want to keep it on the calendar. So we would just put it on the calendar for 6 weeks. And a lot of times I'd go months in between. And then I get seasonal affective disorder sometimes. And so in those moments, sometimes I'll end up going back, for more intensive therapy, or if I'm working through something specific, like relationship wise, just while I'm going through the healing, sometimes I'll try to keep it on the calendar closer together. Or I went through a major surgery recently, and I was scared. And so I thought, maybe I just need to make sure that I've got therapy right before and right after. And maybe I won't need it, but maybe I will. And so that way I've just tried to get to the point where I can make it work for me. And it does.
And it does. I love that. It's so, to me, what stands out is that transformation from the beginning of your view of therapy. Like, you have to be a certain level of like not functioning, or this kind of Jekyll and Hyde idea, before it's an option. And now it's like part of your support structure and your health, self-care. All of that is I'm just going to keep therapy as an option before and after things I know are going to be challenging. Like it's just how you might build in childcare to get the things done that you need to. You're just building in therapy to take care of yourself, and it's just part of your life. It's really, that's very telling to me, that big difference. And if I'm understanding right, so the real kind of active, intense part of therapy with this current therapist that worked best for you, was that about 12 weeks?
I am trying to I'm honestly trying to remember because I know I went to her for the first time like early January because I was in the emergency room the week after Christmas about 2.5 years ago. And then at that point I know I was going every week, and then it started to taper to every 2 weeks. And I want to say that it was early spring when um we decided to go, like, to just keep it on the calendar, but that I had like graduated, so to speak.
Mhm.
Not graduated from it forever because I wanted to keep going, but I wasn't in that zone of just intense struggle anymore. And I still did continue to go. So yeah, like you said, 12 weeks is a guess, but just based on what I remember, I mean, I would have to go back in my calendar and like really look for sure, but it seemed to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 weeks, 3 months ish.
That's amazing. That's because that's really for the severity of what you're describing, really severe panic attacks and ending up in the hospital and having tried and tried and tried with other therapists and obviously doing everything else that you can just think of on your own to have that kind of turnaround. And I know it wasn't over, but that
Mhm.
kind of leveling up in your healing that quickly, it just speaks to how you were really in the right spot. You were probably wanting to heal badly enough, um, and just kind of ready and assertive enough to get what you needed, but also that bond, that therapeutic bond between you and your therapist must have been really solid, especially from the beginning. It must have just really been there and just helped you heal. Because, like you talked about earlier, needing connection to heal and process, that's that's pretty universal. Like you can sit in a room with a really smart, good person who wants to help you, and it just, if there's not that bond, it doesn't work. And that's not you really unique to you. That the research supports it, that of all the factors that go into therapy, all the different kinds of training, all the different models of therapy, all the different interventions like EMDR or other things, those things don't matter nearly as much as the alliance, the connection between therapist and client. So that time period shows that, how sick, like you said, I was so sick, to be able to feel that much change and that much momentum in 3 months or less is really, really telling. It's really fun to hear about. Maybe isn't the right word, but it's exciting. Um, Good. I'm so glad that you found her. So this is the last question. It's my favorite question. What would you tell your pre-therapy self?
Oh, my pre-therapy self. That is an interesting question because in fact, the last time I went to therapy, we kind of talked about that pre-therapy self a little bit. Um, I number one have compassion for my pre-therapy self, so to speak. And I do get emotional about this because I'm so grateful for all of the experiences that have taught me. I don't really regret anything. I was doing my best in the beginning. I'm still doing my best. But I think my pre-therapy self saw the struggles that I was facing with anxiety and that sort of thing as sort of this separate entity, if that makes sense. Like it was like, well, there's me, there's Kate, and then there's anxiety. I didn't want to like own that as a part of my life. I just wanted to hurry up and get rid of it. And I thought, okay, well, if I just go to therapy and if I just like exercise enough and eat right, then I'll just be able to get rid of that and it just won't be a part of my life anymore. And so I think for me, getting to the point where those illnesses where I laugh. It's not even funny, but it's funny because I just didn't, without having been through what I have gone through, I just couldn't understand that. I just thought that like I would just be healthy my whole life and nothing would ever go wrong as long as I did everything right. But turns out our bodies just have things. So that pre-therapy self was doing her best. And once I got to the point that that anxiety and that depression, spiraled into panic disorder and spiraled into I can't function anymore, and just I'm a spiritual person, and just praying and pleading with God that I could get better so that I could cook macaroni and cheese for my kids, and that I could get better so that I could drive again, and so that I could remember what it felt like to feel peace again. Um, it was all encompassing. And so now, where I am now, I see those struggles as just part of my mortal body. It's just something that I deal with. Every human, every animal, every creature has strengths and has weaknesses. In fact, even the things we create, our cars and our houses, they have things that are just incredible and beautiful, and things that we love and that function for us over time. But there are also things that maybe bug us. Maybe our garage is just perpetually too small, or maybe, there's that door that just, you can't get it to close all the way and it's always drafty, or whatever it is. But that part of my mind that malfunctioned when I would have babies and when my hormones were out of whack, that doesn't equate to like a weakness that's just out here that I need to get rid of. It's a part of me that I need to nurture and I need to care for. And that there is no shame in owning that as part of my whole self, but that I can honor the beauty, I can honor the strength, I can honor the wonderful things that I have to offer, as well as I can honor those parts that need more help and that need repair and that need constant effort to take care of them. And that there's no shame in that. There's no shame in anyone being born without their left arm. And so I think that you would go to therapy to learn how to function if you lost a limb. You would go to therapy if you lost the ability to be calm. Of course you would. And so I don't understand why I thought that pre-therapy self thought, and maybe there's that notion that a lot of people have in their head that you're a weak person and that you don't need that, or whatever it is, those negative ideas. That if I could, go and say, really, this isn't a bad thing, then I could try. But I don't know if I would have listened. I think maybe I had to go through that intensive struggle to get to where I am now. But so I am sort of like you. I like to go out and I like to be able to tell people, don't be afraid to do this. You are a worthy, wonderful person. And if you need to go to therapy, and maybe you don't even need to, but you just want to because maybe somebody told you it was a good idea, I don't know. Or if you feel like your marriage isn't where it could be, but it's not terrible, that doesn't mean don't go to therapy. It means go to therapy, because why wouldn't you want it to be that much better to just understand each other? So that's kind of a lot and a big long answer, but I am all for it. And I think that it's such a good thing. And both my husband and I, that now that we've had more experience with it, and I said we've never really done like marriage therapy per se, but he's come to sessions with me, and he has come with me once, because we were like, there's just something like that she doesn't understand, I don't understand. So I was like, why don't you just come with me and we'll just go talk to my therapist and see what she says. And it helped. And like, why not try to do things that are going to help? So I'm all for it.
Well, me too. Thank you so much. So much of what you said is so beautiful and just generous, to share yourself that way. And you totally got me. Like, I just totally almost had tears falling. So I'm just really so glad we got to talk, and so glad that there will be other people who will hear this and I'm sure, take so much from it. So thank you. Just thank you so much for being so kind and generous with your time and, your emotions and your energy. It's huge. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. It is my pleasure. I hope that lots of people can benefit maybe from my experiences, but that they can also benefit from therapy, and that more and more people will do it. I hope that the world changes to a point that it's part of the curriculum, that we learn the principles that we would learn in therapy, or that it's just part of graduating. Part of your credit is to go to therapy when you go to college or something, because I think it would change so much for so many people.
I agree. Yeah. How amazing would it be if part of like the kindergarten curriculum was emotional intelligence, and emotional communication and conflict resolution, all those things that, like you were kind of describing, so many of us don't reach out to mental health services, whether it's therapy or something else, until we kind of rock bottom. We get desperate, and then we're spending a lot of time in therapy with crisis management or putting out fires. And that's when a lot of people tend to leave therapy, because they think, okay, that crisis is over. But doing that deeper work when things are stable, and steady enough, you can go a little deeper, like what you're describing with working out relationships and some of these things that, you've held with you for a long time, and go when things are okay. And my first ceremonial that I recorded was my own. And I talk about how I didn't, I had to wait a long time on this therapist waiting list, that I just had a feeling she was going to be the right one for me. And so I waited for a few months, and the worst of my kind of symptoms had disappeared. So I thought, like, maybe I don't need to go. I was like, I'll just meet with her, and see how it goes when I finally got in. And she was just like, I'm so glad you came, because this is when we can really do some good work, and I worked with her for a year, and I wasn't in crisis, but every other week for a year I did that. And so that's kind of, I agree with you, I guess. The long answer is it would be amazing to have that integrated just as part of the culture, part of the expectations of becoming an adult, is that you kind of know these things. Okay, thank you so much, Kate. Thanks a million. I'm gonna go ahead and end this recording, and then